Hello and welcome. Whoa. He did not tell me he was going to be doing that.
I felt like this podcast needed a little theme song.
Do we have intro music now? Hello and welcome to the Sam and Meshach podcast, aka Elevator Music Central. Hi.
Hey everybody, how you doing? How was your week?
God, this is starting out way more peaceful than we usually have.
You want it to be less peaceful, Sam? Are you?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we should continue to speak softly. Keep the peace up. Take sips of LaCroix and sing elevator music.
Okay. Cool.
Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the Sam and Meshach podcast. We were just discussing how fantastic Meshach looks with his fancy new laptop. Tell us about it.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. I have a new laptop. I have the 13-inch MacBook Air, and I am absolutely loving it. It is a fantastic machine, and it has a much better webcam than my iMac did. So that's why I look a little more high definition.
Meshach, can we segue quickly into your relationship with like Apple fandom?
Sure, we can touch into my relationship with Apple as a concept, because I see Apple as a symbol similar to a diamond ring on your finger. Like if you have a iPhone, that's like step 1. Minimal respect. But then if you whip out
anyone without an iPhone, just no respect then?
No respect. Well, there's very little to be given to anyone without an iPhone, besides pity. And then if you take out a laptop, a MacBook laptop, there's just a sense of camaraderie. And it's just a we are in this together kind of feel. It's a you belong here. We all belong here. Now, this, of course, excludes everyone who does not have an Apple product, in which case they should be banished. They should be banished from whatever space I am in, obviously.
Right, okay. Well, now, I want you to touch a little bit more on the journey that you took to get to this point, because if I do recall correctly, you once had a Google phone. Is that right?
I briefly misstep. So I have owned only Apple products for the entire duration of my life, except for a very short period. My iPhone 7 passed away, and it was just looking to be too expensive to upgrade to, at that point, I think it was the iPhone 9, or they don't have an iPhone 9, the iPhone X. And so I decided that the cheaper, more economical option was to go with the Google Pixel 4a, which I learned to live with for about a year. And
was it even that long? I don't remember it being that long.
It was 11 months. It was 11 months that I had the Google Pixels, from September of 2021 all the way until August of 2022. And in early August 2022, I happened to be at camp, and I was just being reckless, and sort of reckless on purpose, and my phone fell off the side of a picnic table, and just perfectly on the corner, and the screen shattered. Not enough that made the phone unusable, not even enough that made the phone unpleasant. There just happened to be a hairline fracture across the screen, and within 45 minutes of that happening, I had purchased an iPhone that was arriving to my door and was there by the time I got back from that trip.
You're kidding me. Is that true?
Yeah, that is 100% true. That part is 100% true. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm bringing this up because Meshach is an Apple elitist. Really hardcore. If you couldn't tell from his language about the subject. I am less of a hardcore Apple elitist, and I have been thinking about making the switch away.
Making the switch away from Apple entirely?
Well, not entirely. Like I would keep the Apple products that I have, but like for my next computer, I think it's probably not going to be Apple.
Well, that would be a dumb decision, Sam, because it would mean that we couldn't hang out in the same places.
Yeah, that's true. If I didn't have an Apple laptop, you would just disown me or what?
No, I
You know
wouldn't.
what? I can't help but
I
notice
just make you sit outside.
you're not wearing the AirPods or Air Maxes, whatever.
So I've recently had an epiphany with AirPods,
Hmm.
which is that they are not as good of a product as they were promised. And here's what I mean by that. We had tethered headphones for a very, very long time, and they worked pretty great. And they kind of worked for basically as long as you needed them to work, and then at some point you kind of you lost them or they got damaged, and then you had to buy a new pair. The problem with the AirPods, Sam, is that the AirPods wear out. So the original AirPods, they cost about $140. They've cost about $140 for the entire duration that they've been around. And they last about 9 to 12 months. And you don't notice it, but slowly they get quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter.
Really?
Yes, until after about a year in, they're almost unusable because they've dimmed so quiet. And at the price point, they're just
This is how I feel about all things Apple, though.
What do you mean?
Like when I get an iPhone, it's got about a year of like its best use, like lifetime, right?
Right.
After 1 year, when the new iPhone comes out, because for some reason they release one every year that is the exact same.
And doesn't make any sense because it's the same phone. Like it's literally they upgrade the camera slightly.
I don't even know if they're doing that at this point. I haven't. So I currently have an iPhone 8. This is my dad's old phone. Previous to this, I had an iPhone 6.
Yeah.
And then previous to that, I had the 5 color when they introduced colors.
Oh yeah, that was a good time.
And then previous to that, I had my dad's iPhone 3 with no SIM card in it. It was just an iPod.
Nice.
That is the entire history of all of my phones. And I essentially hold on to iPhones until they are like absolute waste.
I agree completely. In fact, I don't even buy new iPhones. I buy 3 to 4 year old iPhones, refurbished because they're fantastic, and they work just as well.
Everything after the iPhone 4, in my opinion, has been almost completely superfluous. I'm not even joking.
Agreed. Yes.
Like, they're always talking about like upgrading their processor and XYZ, and like the camera gets nicer. Okay, the camera being nicer is a cool plus, especially for people like you and me. The microphone being nicer is a cool plus. But like at the end of the day, if I'm trying to shoot a movie, I pull out a camera,
right?
Not a phone, and everything else. Like, what do I really use my phone for? To like text message people, call people, and watch YouTube videos. And listen to music. Those are like the 4 things that I use my phone for, really.
I'm totally with you, Sam. I'm totally with you. While I may be an Apple elitist, I'm not one of the people that thinks you need the newest, best Apple products. I think that oftentimes the older products work very, very well.
See, I think a true Apple elitist would tell you that you're poor right now. You know what I mean? Like they would just want to spit on you. Oh, you don't have the new iPhone 16 Deluxe XS gold-plated edition? Oh no, are you frozen?
Oh, I was frozen. I believe that we are back.
Oh. Well, I'm not sure if the audience heard me. I was saying that like a true Apple elitist would say if you don't have the new iPhone 15 Max X Plus S edition with gold plating, then you're not even a real Apple fan. So are you just an Apple fan because you think it's a better product, or you said it's like a diamond ring? It's status to you. That's what you're buying.
It's totally status, but I don't need the newest. And can I tell you a story? Yesterday, So on Thursday, my girlfriend cracked her iPhone, and she and I both have the iPhone XRs, which like came out a few years ago. They're great. They're really, really great. You can buy them refurbished for $200, and they work fantastic.
Can you?
Yep. So there's a website called Back Market, BACK Market, that sells refurbished tech, and they sell iPhone XRs for $200. And so she cracked her phone, and so she took it into the Apple store at the mall to have it fixed. And we went in yesterday morning, and there was just this like extraordinary condescending tone from the Apple employee who was serving her, where he like walks up and he's like, "Oh, you have an iPhone XR? Are you sure you don't want to upgrade?" And she's like, "No, like it works fine. Like just you can just fix it. Like I just want you to do the screen repair." And he's like, "Okay, I guess I will. Maybe are you thinking maybe you'll just upgrade when the iPhone 15 comes out?" And she was like, "Yeah, sure, buddy. I'll fucking upgrade
Sure,
when
I'll
the
upgrade.
iPhone 15 comes up." It was very condescending and really, really kind of ugly. But it works fine. The iPhone XR works great.
Yeah. I once had a similar experience where I was trying to fix a cracked screen, literally, and I had an old phone. It was going to be like a $70 repair or something like that, which bummer, but whatever. And I go in to the Apple store, and this guy, like, I get the phone repaired, and then he's like, "Oh, but don't you want to buy Apple Care, or don't you want to like upgrade your Apple Care or extend your Apple Care?" Like, I'm not joking, like 50 times via the duration of my time being there. And it was literally just a drop off and a pickup. And both times he like harassed me about it. And he kept on saying, like, "Dude, I don't make commission on this. I don't make commission on this. I don't make commission on this. I just really think it's a good product." Like, one time I saw someone walk out and drop it and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I was like, it's kind of suspicious. He was saying he didn't get commission on that so many times.
Right.
So I just Googled it. I just like got back into my car, had my, freshly upgraded iPhone, new screen, and Googled, do Apple employees get commission on Apple Care sales? As it turns out, no, they don't get commission, which is why he was saying that so many times. But you know what they do get? They do get promotions if they sell a certain number of Apple Care things. So he was just like very clearly trying to upsell me.
So not direct commissions in the short term, long-term commissions.
Yeah, they don't get like a cut. They don't get a cut of whatever they sell you, but they do get like there are incentives for them to do it, which is fun. I usually love Apple service. It's usually really easy. But
yes.
Anyways, what are we doing today?
Sam, I was thinking we could start these podcasts by saying something that we learned or rediscovered this week.
I'm ready. I've got mine locked and loaded. I've been thinking about it all week.
Go for it, Sam. Go for it.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to use this as a pitch for my new channel called The Sam Experiment. If you haven't subscribed, go subscribe now. There will be a link in the description. I discussed this very thing in my very first episode over there. There is a canyon between your and my consciousnesses that is unbridgeable, is the thing that I have been thinking about all week long.
Please elaborate.
So I guess I've like always known this, right? Like I will never know what it's like to be Meshach Valley, obviously. But it's very easy to like say that and think you know it without like understanding it and feeling it. And this last week I was talking to a friend, and it was like a kind of heavy conversation, and on both ends, and we were like sharing things back and forth. And I realized that like all of the things that I was saying, I felt like were failures. Like all of the words I'm putting out, no matter how articulate they were and how accurate they were, just kind of like felt like shouts into the void, like they were falling off a cliff, and like the meaning of them was not landing with the other person. And I thought to myself, like, because how could it? Right? Like I'm trying to explain the most incomprehensible types of things that exist in my brain, because our brains are so complex and weird, and they are such strange systems that are so unknown even to ourselves, that like language isn't a powerful enough tool to communicate with another person. So connecting this to the video that I made on Sam experiment, I talked about how one of my favorite pieces of art, I think, brings our attention to that. It's The Treachery of Images by Renee Magritte. And so you know the one. It says, "This is not a pipe. I won't shut up about it." I love that painting.
Right. Yes. I'm familiar.
The point of that is like Magritte was making the point that like art can never truly represent whatever is trying to be depicted. But then I make the point in the video that, well, he wasn't really trying to convey a pipe. He was trying to convey a feeling, right? A feeling that he had, or a thought that he had. And all of our collective reflections on that art is how we can best connect with his experience. So art is kind of like the way that we communicate those bigger ideas to each other. And it might be the best way to do that, because language falls flat a lot of the time. And so to wrap this up in a bundle, what I've been thinking about is how I interface with other people, how I fail to, and how I can succeed to through more creative means.
Wow. So are you suggesting that art is a way to cross that bridge over the chasm between our consciousnesses?
I think that it is, I think it's our best attempt yet.
Mm.
You know, like eventually maybe we'll be able to do what they did in Avatar and like attach our brains together, right? And then maybe I can really understand what someone is experiencing. But when I am compelled to like discuss something that really makes me feel like viscerally like I understand another human soul's experience, right? I might talk about, like, I talk about media, right? I talk about art. I talk about movies. I talk about music. If you listen to the album Freudian by Daniel Caesar and you don't walk away with it feeling and understanding lots of his thoughts about love, like, listen closer. He's telling it. He's yelling it out loud. If you don't see a painting and like feel moved by it, right? Maybe that painting is not for you. But like, if you look at all art and you're not moved by it, then you're not looking, right? There's something trying to be communicated there. Likewise, you know, there's a reason that excellent writers don't, you know, describe things as explicitly as they could, right? They use metaphor, they use simile, they use imagery, they use all these other things to evoke emotions in us, right? Because they can't explain all of the things that they want to explain, but they can like kind of lead you down a path that will make you feel as they want you to feel.
Right. And do you think that, well, that experience also will vary from person to person who is experiencing it, right? Because to some degree, they're overlaying their own experience and interpretation of the world onto that pathway that is being carved by the artist.
Certainly. And I think that the best, I want to be careful because like saying things like the best art is always tricky. But the best art, in my opinion, like my favorite book is The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye does like a really immaculate job of putting yourself in Holden Caulfield's world. I don't know how it's done. Like it's a real like masterclass in writing. But when you're reading that book, suddenly you kind of like feel this isolation, this kind of loneliness, this kind of like desperateness that he feels. And of course, all those things will be affected by how you interpret those feelings. But I feel like it takes, it would be difficult not to empathize with those feelings if you are trying to, right? A lot of people, I know
Right.
that book is a bad example because a lot of people are like, Holden Caulfield's such a dick. He's just complaining about everything for the whole time, blah, 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 blah. But if you just take a moment, I always tell people this, you just take a moment, just like really try and put yourself in that character's shoes and really listen to what he's saying and what he's thinking. Suddenly you feel very connected to the author and you feel very connected to the character. Uh, it's not about feeling exactly how the author wants you to feel. It's about like sharing that space and understanding what is trying to be communicated. Because understanding what is trying to be communicated is almost more important than again having some explicit communication. And again, this is a big thought in my mind right now because, as you know, very explicit communication is very important to me, but it has limits and failures.
Yes. Right. There are edges that language runs up against, in particular because like words have different meanings for different people.
Exactly. And I was also thinking, we don't think about it enough how bizarre that difference between people really is. I point over here and I say, like, that blanket is red. And of course, you and I both agree that it's red, right?
Right. I do, in fact, agree that the blanket is red.
Of course. And all of our audience probably will too. But, the truth of the matter is that you and I could be seeing two completely different colors. Right? We know the wavelength is the same, but the way that our brains interpret it could be completely different. Now, we'll say, okay, what does it matter? We both agree that it's red. We both discuss it like it's red. We both agree on the wavelength that is red. Okay, maybe in the case of red, it doesn't matter very much. But what about like in the case of sadness or mourning or desire or love or just anxiety or tiredness, all of these like big things that might play a big or small role in your everyday life. I get up and I'm a little tired. Okay, you're tired. What does that feel like?
Right.
You'll never be able to tell me what it feels like for you to be tired. Oh, I'm sleepy. Okay. It's like, oh, my muscles feel a certain way. I don't know what it is to feel like you feel. There is a huge gap between us. And it's possible that everything we are saying is almost meaningless to the other person. But when we look at the same thing, the same piece of art, and we have some combination of things evoked in us, right? Because we can both agree that that's red. And if we look at a painting and both of us are seeing red, right? Red might evoke a certain feeling in both of us, or a certain combination of things might evoke the same feeling in both of us. And I feel like that is where we can connect, because we will both experience those things through our own lenses, but we're experiencing the same thing.
Right. So that's fascinating. Yeah. No, I like this idea a lot, Sam. I like this idea a lot.
That's a big thought. It's also not, I'm not articulating it correctly, hilarious, twist. But maybe I'll make a painting about it sometime.
You should. Have you thought about ever going into doing fine art?
I think that, like I've said, language is super important to me. And so if I was going to do art that was a little bit more abstract and tried to bridge that gap, it would be things that I've already done, like poetry. You've seen me do some of that on Sam and Meshach, or like I was a big fan of my nostalgia poem that I shared. I think that one captures a little bit of what it feels like to feel nostalgic, but not really. I mean, I preface in that video, I said, I've tried many times but failed. One attempt went like this. It's all of it fails. It is properly impossible to to bridge that void, I think, right now.
Right. Unless we're Avatar connecting our brains together and literally experiencing a singular consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's fascinating. I mean, I like the idea that you were talking about earlier that like we've never inhabited any other body but our own. And so like our experience of the world is limited by the single body that we have lived in.
The single body and the single mind. You know, even if
True.
even if you transported this, mind to another body, and maybe you feel things differently and experience things differently, like you are your mind, and you are your collection of experiences, and your mind and your experiences will impact how you see the world. That is empirical.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right. I mean, like that's without question.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just weird. It's just weird to think that like I this is so philosophical and so weird, but I kind of love it. I am a thing, and I can never not be that thing, right? As soon as I am no longer Sam, as soon as I'm no longer my collection of experiences and thoughts and memories, like I think I cease to be like this entity,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
maybe if I could properly experience what it is to be you, I would no longer actually be myself, and therefore I myself couldn't even experience what it's like to be you, because it would just be you experiencing it.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating too, Sam, because I think it goes to the point of potentially, you're talking about art specifically, but if we zoom out on art generally, the idea of the story is perhaps one of the, I don't know, like largest forms of art, one of the things that we try to use the most. And this idea that listening to people and hearing their story is a way to connect with them is like an attempt by like illustrating something larger than just the words themselves, by like creating a narrative that we're able to tap into someone else's experience and see things a little bit more. I mean, the line is literally through their eyes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, this is all the frustration, I guess, that like I can't, I can hear those stories, but I can't empathize with those stories to the extent that I want to. Right? Like
Mm.
empathy doesn't really exist.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that, and all forms of empathy are really sympathy, right? Because I don't know what it's like to experience the thing that you're experiencing, which is
Right.
what empathy means, right? Like you
Sure.
might have been shot, and I might have been shot, but I don't know what it's like to be you and be shot. Might be a
Right.
billion times worse. Um, and that's true. I mean, I
Yeah.
was gonna say disappointing, but it's just kind of like a matter of fact. I don't know if I would want to empathize with other people as truly as as I think I want to. How horrible would that be?
Yeah. Well, or magical. I don't know. Like to truly be able to see the world through someone else's perspective, I think would be a deeply radical thing. Um,
But then at
but it
what
would,
and like when do you lose yourself in that too? Like I'm imagining a world where, okay, let's say our iPhones can now, instead of looking at screens, like you fucking, I'm swearing, I'm sorry, you just like plug it into the back of your skull or whatever, and every person that you scroll across, not only do you get to see whatever video or piece of art they're making, you also get to experience their perspective on the universe, and experience their love and lust and pain and whatever. That is very dystopic to me. That feels terrible, and I feel like I would lose my sense of self very quickly, and we would kind of all become this collective consciousness. Maybe that's a bad thing.
yeah, I'm not certain that I can explicitly say whether that is good or bad. Like I think to some degree there are elements of that that are really I don't want to say productive, but that would be powerful. But I don't
You
necessarily
might be able
think
to stop killing one another.
we probably would stop killing one another. We probably would stop arguing in the same way with one another. It would probably become it would there I don't know. Would it become a utopia of just single oneness? Or would it just become a, collection of confusion?
Yeah, it would feel. The problem is that if I could properly empathize with someone who I disagree vehemently, right? I always try and put myself in someone else's shoes when debating something. So I don't like Trump, right? Say someone really loves Trump, but
Sure.
and let's just say that person loves Trump for the wrong reasons, and they're like, I hate immigrants. Right? I don't hate immigrants. A lot of my family. If I could like properly empathize with their experience of hatred towards immigrants, I couldn't blame them for it. You know, it's
Yeah.
just a true belief that they hold, assuming that
Yes.
this person is not grifting or whatever, right? Like it's actually true. It, okay, well then how do I hold both of those things in my head? My genuine, love for these people and someone else's genuine hatred for these people. Both of them are just equally true. And right now I can disagree with things. But if I'm properly immersed in someone else's real experience to the extent that they are, it should be impossible for me to deny the things that they know are true. Or maybe, in this world where you can blend consciousnesses, like the strength of someone's convictions can compel one person or another.
Sure.
And like, but then even how do you even like come out of that experience? What is it like to like experience what the world is like through your eyes and then come back into my consciousness?
Yes. And I think, Sam, you are someone too who has strong opinions. And I think that would be very difficult to step into a space where it is like no longer possible to hold those opinions in the same way.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
also think a thing that a lot of people miss about me is that I'm also a person of strong, like, moral convictions. I was talking to a friend a couple weeks ago about the environment, and I hope that you know that I am very passionate about the environment.
Yes.
But a lot of people, apparently very close to me, just don't know that I'm like, I would use the word passionate for it because I seem dispassionate when I'm like parsing what I think our policy should be, for example.
I see what you're saying. Like when you're talking about the minutia of like what is actually happening, you don't have the same anger and frustration that other people might.
Right. I at least don't put it on display. I don't, and I also don't think I genuinely feel it as strongly as some people do.
Right.
Um, I think it would be hard to not just reconcile my thoughts because that's something I'm practiced in, right? Like I'm okay with like seeing the other side of a debate. Maybe I can see where their perspective is, and that's not too hard. But have the feelings that conflict with it would be so weird. I can change my
Yes.
thoughts, I can change my opinions, but like I've never changed my feelings about a moral matter.
You've never changed your feelings about a moral matter. So there's never been a time where have you ever been persuaded by someone else's conviction about something?
Yes, but so I think there's like I'm forgetting the terminology now. This is what I get being 1 year out of college. I already can't remember the terminology. So there are essentially like two levels of morality. One is about matters of fact, and one is about the like moral facts underlying that thing. So let's say you and I both agree that you shouldn't kill the soul of God if God exists. right?
Okay, fair enough.
That
Sure.
sounds like something that two reasonable people could agree on. And that if most, moral agents in the world really considered, they'd probably be like, okay, when you put it in those terms, yeah, we probably shouldn't kill the soul of God. Whatever that means. Now, let's say that I think that the soul of God is in this here rubber ducky. And you don't believe that the soul of God is in this rubber ducky. And then this thing was strapped to a train track, and there's a person on one side and a rubber ducky on the other. And obviously you would choose to run this thing over, and I wouldn't. Right?
Right.
So you might be able to convince me out of the matter of fact whether or not the soul of God exists in this thing. Right? Like that is something I've experienced in my life. The first level about, do we agree that the moral fact of this thing exists? Right? But then that second layer, should you kill the soul of God, I've never experienced in my lifetime someone convincing me that I shouldn't. Or that I should kill the soul of God, right? Which is something that you might experience if you were swapping consciousnesses with someone.
So it's sort of a deeper level of moral grounding to some degree.
Right. Like, I believe very strongly in utilitarian principles. There are people out there who, just for whatever reason, are like, you can kill 1 billion people. I don't care. I'm saving my family.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
They are just so principally against killing their family that they would literally let 1 billion people die. They don't care. That is not something that is in my moral language. I can't understand it. 1 billion people is incomprehensible. Right? And I love my family dearly, so much, but it's crazy to think that I would kill off 1/8 of the entire planet to save my nuclear family. If I were to really get into someone else's brain, someone who believed, something fundamentally different than me on something like that, how could I even conceptualize it? How could I even fit it into my framework without everything breaking?
I have a question for you, Sam. Do you feel like your morals, because as you're describing them, they seem very clear and they seem very thought out. Do you think that your morals are more clear than other people's?
I I don't like answering that question because I feel like a cocky douche when I do. But I think yes. I think and I'll explain a little bit why. I think that I have been very deliberate about pouring a lot of attention and time into it because it has mattered to me to understand that about myself. And I think a lot of other people have done better, cooler things with their time. And this is only something that I really came to towards the end of solidifying my moral framework. Most people are going to be like, yeah, don't kill a baby. Most people are going to be like, yeah, you probably shouldn't steal things. Most people are going to say it's not nice to say mean things. These are all things that we do.
Right.
And people that don't agree with them are just shunned socially or whatever. And so I think for a lot of people, those just rules work. They're given to you in kindergarten. You follow the rules for the rest of your life. You don't have to ever think. But I actually don't know what really spurred this. I think it was just because I was into philosophy, but I also went through an intense depression in 8th grade, which was a real renaissance for my thought. And at that time, I kind of started thinking about philosophy really deeply and why I was doing things and why I wouldn't do other things and blah, blah, blah. And that has meant for many years challenging myself repeatedly with more and more intense questions, pushing the limits of my moral framework and making sure that things are really solid. And I find that a lot of people, I don't know if it's most people, I would venture to say probably most people, haven't even done like one or two layers at poking and prodding the moral system. Usually it's very quick to break down. If you're having a challenging discussion with someone and you ask them like two why questions, suddenly the whole world melts down.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I guess like, and you know, I don't mean to be that guy. If you're talking to religious people, often if it's one or two questions deep, it's just because like God says so, and who are we to challenge the word of God? Or like we can't even comprehend God's plan. That's often where it goes to. If it's utilitarian people, it's just the most good for the most people, right? Like I'm utilitarian in principle, but I think I've got it a little bit deeper than that. There are some people who are nihilistic who will say, "Oh, it doesn't matter," and then you'll ask a question like, "Okay, so you are completely dispassionate about whether or not I kill you right now?" And they'll say, "Yes, of course," because you know those are the real philosophical types that think they can bite any bullet. And then I've never done this, but I'm sure if you pull a knife out and you put it at their throat, they're not like completely sober and cool and chill. No, those people shit their pants too. So like clearly those people haven't thought it through either, right? There are layers to these things.
What would you say to someone who was maybe wanting to examine their morals more deeply? Like, do you have kind of an initial question or a place to start? Now, obviously, this happened more organically for you, but if somebody was, listening to this discussion and they were going, "Hey, I don't know if I really have examined my morals," where would you recommend they begin?
That is a really good question. I think I do have recommendations. Take a conviction that you don't care much about. Take something like look up like a bill that's going through Congress, and like it's probably going to be like some budget thing, and you're like, do I care about this? Why should I care about this? You know, or maybe it doesn't have to be Congress. Maybe it's like your local school counselor. Maybe it's something going on in your house. Like my mom wants me to throw out the trash. Why should I do that? Or why shouldn't I? And think about it. Start there. Find an answer to that question for yourself. Why should I do X? Or why shouldn't I do X? And then once you have a question for that, figure out like what that is based on. So like I'll give you an example. So my mom says I should take out the trash. I should take out the trash because I care about my mom. I don't want to disappoint her. I don't want to live in a dirty house, et cetera, et cetera. Then pick one of those and say, okay, why? Why do I, and I'll go to a challenging one quickly so that we can see where this goes. Why do I care about my mom? My mom has been good to me for my entire life. She birthed me. She, she has care for me. That's an interesting one. Okay, why do I care if someone has care for me? If Hitler had care for me, would I care for him? Would I take out the trash for Hitler if he cared for me? And then you'll find answers that you don't like. Maybe I would. Right? Maybe I would do nice things for evil people if they were nice to me. People do it all the time. People support evil people all the time because they're nice to them. And then challenge those beliefs. Keep challenging those beliefs. Keep challenging those beliefs. Keep asking questions. The best way is just to keep asking questions. But start small. Don't do what I just did. Don't go ask, why do I love my mother? Because probably your answer is going to be, because I love my mother. My mother's the greatest person ever. Like, that's going to be your answer at first, because that's everyone's answer at first, especially if you're young. Try and answer simple questions and keep asking questions until they get to be really difficult.
I like that. Do you believe that it is good to have a strong moral framework?
I think for myself, it is essential. It is, I don't mean to take this podcast to a dark place, But you know what? I also want to be able to freely explore ideas. So let's do it. For me, one of those questions that I had to answer was, why don't I kill myself?
Wow.
Right? Like when I was in eighth grade and I was depressed and I kept asking questions and kept asking questions and finding answers I didn't like. One of the questions I had to ask is, why don't I kill myself?
Mm.
Why do people kill themselves? Likewise. And this isn't going to get monetized on YouTube for sure. But, I think there are good answers to that question. I think there are really good answers to that question. And I think that if you can get through the difficult part of looking, you will find good answers. And you'll find good answers to all of the questions that you can ask if you're willing to challenge yourself honestly and look for answers and be open to new ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of like stepping into a very uncomfortable territory and just like sort of, you're in the muck and it's like just take one more step, see where you find,
Yeah, and
see what's in here. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the questions that you're asking.
don't be afraid of the questions that you're asking. I would say don't be afraid of the answers to the questions you're asking. I think the questions should be scary. When I found myself asking the question, why don't I kill myself? That was scary.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like my family will probably see this and stuff. I was never close to suicide. I was never close. But it was a question that I asked, right?
Yeah.
And that should be a scary question. And it is a question, does God exist? Especially if you're raised in a religious family. That's a scary question.
Yeah.
I know people who are very religious that ask themselves that question for the first time honestly. And that was a scary moment for them. The whole framework came crumbling down. So
Yeah.
So don't be afraid, and don't be afraid of the answers that you find. If you ask yourself the question, does God exist? And you find the answer no. If you're religious, that's going to be a bump. If you're morally examining that question and you're like, I want to make this as true as I can make it, and you discover the answer no, then what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't be morally dishonest with yourself and be like, no, he's clearly real because XYZ, right? You should roll with that answer and you should keep pushing through and you should say, okay, if God isn't real, where does my meaning come from? That's another big question that people struggle with. That's another question that comes from, why don't I kill myself? Or at least I thought it did at the time. That was an interesting question. Like, why does there have to be a purpose at all? Is another good question.
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah, like if I thought if I'm purposeless, I should not exist. It's like there are things that are purposeless that exist. I can just be one of those things. Or, if I want a sense of purpose, I can give myself one. There's no reason that a task has to be given to me by some greater power.
Yeah, right.
I'm interested to hear about your moral framework and whether or not you think yours is fleshed out and maybe how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, I don't think that my moral framework has gone under the same rigor that yours has. I have put ideas into question when they've come up in conversation, either with myself or with others. But I haven't spent the time to like seek out all of the questions and try to find answers to them. I think for me, I am very comfortable at this point in my life not knowing. So, what I mean by that is I'm very okay with like stepping into a situation and not having a clear answer for what it is that I should do. And using the contextual framework of that situation to try to learn what to do.
Hmm.
So relying on my experience and the perspective of others more heavily, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So one thing I'm going to preface this by saying I find these conversations very entertaining. I'm happy to go into this like philosophical rabbit hole. If you want to change the subject, let me know. We'll change it real quick. Um, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on whether or not it is a safe thing to be doing to rely on other people's experience and moral intuitions.
I do think it's safe. I think that other people have lived longer and more lives than I have, right? Like the collective experience of many others is much greater than the experience of my own. And so the more perspectives that I can draw from, the more rich the pool is that I'm pulling the information that I am using to understand and interpret the world. And to some degree, I think the lack of rigidity that I have allows me to be open to more perspectives that people have. Um, I feel, and I'm going to use the word feel because I think that's correct. I feel that at 23 now, I know very little about the world. I don't claim to know much. And people that have lived here longer or have lived in harder situations than I have gone through more things than I have, I think have a wider perspective than I currently do. And so I'm very comfortable not copy paste, but to stay open to allowing the things that they say to become part of what I believe.
Okay. Now, so I'm going to try and do this in a completely like non-antagonistic way, just to encourage and maybe demonstrate for the audience like what types of questions come to my mind, and they're like philosophical questions that I can branch from this. I want to see how you reconcile these things because I think it'll be interesting. You
Okay,
cool?
let's go. Let's
Okay.
do it.
Um, how does that fare when the systems, big systems that are very old and that are claimed by many people who have lived longer than you, etc., are not just. And maybe for a concrete example of that, you can think about slavery, which was just a couple hundred years old, and which at the time was thousands of years old, and was very status quo and very accepted and blah blah blah. How if you were living at a time like that, say, some unjust thing like that was happening right now, how would you challenge that more, given your current frame?
What do you mean by challenge that morally?
So, for example, if I was living at the time of slavery, right, I would also have challenges to overcome, right, about discovering that slavery was bad and standing up for it and being like, this is not good, we should stop doing this. Because I have utilitarian principles, and therefore, greatest good for the greatest number of people. What is a person? If I don't think a slave is a person, conscious thing worth moral consideration, then that will be a challenge for me. What I'm hearing from you is that you're kind of okay relinquishing a degree of control to the systems in place, the moral compass of people who are maybe older than you, have more experience than you, et cetera, et cetera. At the time of slavery, everyone would have agreed that slavery is okay, right? So, what would your challenges be for discovering that slavery is bad and then having the moral conviction to tell your peers that slavery is bad?
I think that I'm not certain what it would be. I think that, my conviction and ideas rely heavily on you know, a wide opinion of perspectives. And um if I wasn't exposed to perspectives that challenge that idea, then I probably wouldn't call it into question. Um, and I think that's probably true for a lot of things. I'm sure that if I were to really, really look at the world, there are things that I would call into question that I don't now, right? Um, and is that the case because it's just easier to not call them into question? Perhaps. Maybe it is easier.
Well, this is
And I I'm not certain that my job is to be a moral compass. I don't I don't think my brain operates in the same way that your brain does. And it's not useful for me to spend a lot of time thinking about these things. Um I find it far more confusing. And I end up kind of thinking about it for a while and then abandoning it and then moving on. Um that's not to say that I'm copy pasting the ideas of any one ideology. In fact, I think I've done quite the opposite. That if somebody were to sit down with me and we want to talk about politics or philosophy or religion, that the perspectives that I have are not singular, or fall along a singular line. But I do think that there is a certain deferring to others simply because I'm not equipped in the same way to answer those questions.
and you don't. And again, this is not judgmental. I don't care at all. Like, you don't care to be. It hasn't interested you.
I'm really happy with my life. I'm really happy just existing as I am.
Don't get into philosophy then. Don't do it.
And I'm really content with the world being is. Like, the world just is. It is as it is. And like, there are things that I want. Like, I really want to get married. I really want to have kids. Why? Who gives a shit? That's what I want to do. And I'm very happy living in the world in that way.
I mean, I'll tell you, like, I think at the end of philosophy, there's no such thing. But if there is an end to philosophy, you find yourself right back there. I think that I have become quite content with my life as well. And I think that it was like probably a more tumultuous arrival to here than it needed to be. There are lots of people that never question their moral compass, never question or not their moral compass, but like where their moral convictions come from and how they can challenge them to the greatest extent and blah blah blah, who live perfectly good, happy, moral lives. And I think that like most people should probably do that. The only problem is that I think that the way that we break through large systems of inequality or whatever is through that really rigorous challenging, right? It's why we play it for jokes, but why I find myself on the opposite end of strange moral questions like if would you eat a conscious plant,
Right.
And our friend group was like, it's a plant, eat it. Yeah, who cares, right? I was like, no, guys, but then what do you value about human life? Like, of course, it's kind of a joke. There's no such thing right now. But the ability to challenge big ideas like that and then follow them through to the end and like understand how it might apply to other more pressing issues is, I think, important. And that is why I have studied philosophy and why I have gone through the trouble of challenging myself over it. And also, like I said, just because like it was for myself at one point. It was like, I would prefer not to die. I wonder why.
Yeah.
And I just did wonder.
That's very fair.
So anyways, maybe we should not start this podcast with the thing we've been reflecting on for the past week. Because
No,
often
Sam.
mine will be that big.
No, I absolutely love it. I think that was a fantastic conversation. I think that it really that was some deep dive Sam, which is what the viewers and listeners here are all about.
I hope so. What was your thing that you were thinking about or reflecting on this past week?
I was thinking a lot about um I was thinking a lot about my relationship to work. Um and I have a very like it stems from late adolescence Casey Neistat consumption, but this very like work hard kind of mentality.
Hmm.
Um and I am currently in a job right now. I'm working this 9 to 5 property management construction job this summer. And I'm finding it far less fulfilling and perhaps even more exhausting than I initially anticipated it being. And, I sort of, when I took the position, I did like an analysis of like, okay, I'm going to be working only 8 hours a day. It's only 40 hours a week at this position, which would allow me then to do things outside of that. And the truth is that these things require far more time than simply the 8 hours that you're present at work. Uh, And so I've been wrestling with that pretty heavily. That, prior to this, I would work 50, 60, 70, 100 hour weeks. But it wasn't with the same rigor, it wasn't in the same system. It wasn't me getting up in the morning and packing a lunch and going to a place and being there until 5 p.m. and then walking out. And I've simply just been reflecting and realizing that my capacity for work is like directly proportional to how much I care about the work. And also, and this is critical and it's not narcissistic, but it does feel selfish. Um, how in charge I am of the work that I am doing.
Hmm.
So the less in charge I am, the less passionate I am about the thing that I am working on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny that you say that. I've also been thinking about that. Um 9 to 5s are exhausting.
And they take so much out of you. It's just you come home and it's this just depletion of resources.
Yep. At least for me, it has made me wonder, like, and I guess the difference. Like, what could I be doing if I was not doing this? I'm an adult
So
now.
much
This is
more. You could do
exactly.
more. This is the thing, Sam. So like prior to working at 9 to 5, I would get up every morning at 5 a.m., 5 or 6 a.m. I would work out for an hour, take a shower, and then whenever I was done, right? So whether it was like 6 or 7, about an hour after I'd woken up, worked out, I was at my desk working in my office. And I would work there until noon. I would have some lunch. I would work there till 5 or 6. Sometimes I'm going around, sometimes I'm working on other projects, but throughout that day, I'm doing my laundry because my laundry needs done. So I'm switching it from the washer to the dryer. So that's not a thing that I have to do when I get home from work. I'm at my house during the day so I can make lunch at noon. I'm this whole there you're able to fill in all of the extra things into the cracks of your day, and your day is so longer that you're actually able to accomplish substantially more in any of those given days.
Yeah.
I was working like 4 or 5 jobs. Easy. It was just stressful because I had to switch between tasks.
The other stressful thing for me is that you need to stay self motivated if you're not at a 95 something, right? You
Well,
need
because suddenly you're no longer being paid for your time.
right.
You're
You're
being
being
paid for
paid for
your
your
output.
product. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and we're saying this. We've literally been in the workforce for a year,
Yeah.
or at least I have. I mean, I guess you've been doing stuff like freelance stuff a little bit longer. Um, I can't imagine myself doing what I'm doing forever.
Yeah.
It won't work. When I have a family, I can't. I can't be this drained from the end of the day because I won't be as good to my kids as I want to be.
Yeah.
And so either I need to figure out how to adapt to current system better, or I need to change the system. I need to shake things up.
And it's a great question. It's like, which is the better option of those two? And I've been wrestling with the same thing. Whether it's like, is this just a math problem of like, you are not consuming enough protein before 12 a.m. or 12 p.m. and then, or you're running at the wrong time during the day, or your water intake levels are way off, or if you just leverage your caffeine, that like, or increase sleep or whatever, or is it really circumstances and your environment has to be the thing that shifts? And I don't know the answer. But I'm leaning toward the latter. Like it feels to me more reasonable, having done both for the last year, and again only a year, right, that it is easier to change your environment than it is to change yourself like biomechanically, so that you can then like you know, be this like superhuman output.
The other thing I was thinking about too is like, we say only a year. A year is more than a percentage of your life, probably.
True.
Statistically, a year is more than a percentage of your life. And I have told myself I want to try solving the problem quickly, sooner rather than later. Because at least for me right now, I'm so stuck into like 9 to 5. Like my weeks look more interesting on Sam and Meshach, or like online presence in general. Like I'm discussing interesting things, or I'm talking with friends, or I'm doing XYZ. Normal day, I get up, go to work, go to the gym, come back, play some video games, go to sleep.
Yeah.
That's Monday through Friday. And then Saturday is like recover, and then Sunday I do chores.
Gotcha.
And like that's fine. Like I'm actually not complaining. Like it's a totally fine thing. I hang out with friends, I go do cool stuff, whatever. But like I don't want that to be my whole life.
That's fair.
I don't want
That's
to
very
be
fair.
so stuck in that routine, and the 9 to 5, like the exhaustion that you're feeling is something that I have been feeling. I've been doing a 9 to 5 since August, and I've enjoyed a lot of that. And I do enjoy my work, and I enjoy my company very much. I'm wearing a shirt that reps them right now. But I do want to, especially being so young, see what other things that I might be good at, and see what other systems might work for me, blah, blah, blah. So I guess we'll see. I also intend on going back to school, so like that's going to be another shakeup. I don't know if that'll be good or bad.
Yes. Nice.
So anyways, we were supposed to talk about superpowers today. Did you know that?
I did know that. I think, Sam, that one might need to be pushed until next week, unfortunately.
I think you're very correct. Maybe what we need is the superpower to add more hours to the day.
That's
then
a good superpower.
9 to 5, relax for another 24 hours, then get back to some other stuff. God, if I had a superpower, that's what I'd use it for. Just naps.
Just naps.
Just naps.
Well, don't give it away this week. I think you got to hang on to what you want your superpower to be, Sam. You got to hold the viewer's suspense. You can't just show your cards.
That's true. Tune in next time for when Meshach and I discuss the superpower to close the unbridgeable gap between human conscious souls.
And also flying. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This has been the Sam and Meshach podcast. We'll catch you all next week.
Peace.